Zaharia, and I'm delighted to be your host for the third season of the Drag and Drop Show. Peep Laja is a legendary marketer and community leader. He's been championing optimization and experimentation for over a decade through CXL, formerly Conversion Excel, one of the most important and respected companies in the marketing space. Now, he's using that experience to build businesses that cover big gaps in the market. In early 2020, Peep launched a startup called CopyTesting, bringing a much-needed service to the space. But soon after launching it, he realized it wasn't getting the type of customers he initially targeted. In fact, CopyTesting was attracting a different category of clients with quite specific needs. Being comfortable with change and a proponent of bold, well-informed decisions, Peep chose to do a rebrand within 6 months of the launch. In this episode, we unpack the rebrand that transformed CopyTesting into Winter.io and the choices behind it. We explore how doing a rebrand earlier in the development of a business can save you a lot of wasted effort. We'll cover how customer development plays a fundamental role in a rebrand and why you should give people a chance to put your brand in a box. We also talk about the risk of not taking control of your brand narrative and letting others fill in the blanks. Plus, why brand extensions almost never work. You're gonna want to take notes. This is Andra Zaharia bringing you the latest episode of the Drag and Drop Show by Creatopy. So, Peep, awesome to have you on the Drag and Drop Show. Really excited to dig into the CopyTesting winter rebrand and kind of unpack what happened there, because you move so incredibly fast in a market that also moves fast, but I feel like your speed is, 3 to 10 times faster than most players in this space. So I'm very curious about your thinking, your process, and everything that goes into that.
Yeah, happy to share all about it. So where should we start?
Let's start with the decision. So you decided to rebrand CopyTesting fairly, early in the history of the company itself. So what prompted that decision? What triggered that decision?
So we launched the company as CopyTesting May 2020 and rebranded it as Winter December of the same year. So almost like half a year later. And the thought that we should probably do that already, was happening for multiple months. And it's a big thing to change the name of your company. You think about brand awareness that we had built up to that point. Oh, we're going to lose that, and the SEO stuff. And so there were many reasons to hesitate. But also then I was thinking, well, it's going to be much easier to do it now, early on, rather than 3 years from now, when change is harder. But then if you look at some historical big renames, people forget, like Moz and SEO Moz. Oh, the backlash when that happened, it's like, oh my God, like everybody knows you. Like no, now nobody remembers, nobody cares. So that was encouraging for me. Why we rebranded. So there were multiple reasons there. Let's start from the top. So when we chose the name CopyTesting, at first I thought it's kind of like usertesting.com. That was kind of the inspiration. That CopyTesting is as a thing to do is just very new. I mean, it's been around actually from the 60s, but it's not mainstream. It's very niche. So the idea that we're going to make this mainstream and we're going to be the tool for copytesting was attractive. It's going to be like the Kleenex of that equivalent. That was the initial idea. And then we thought also that we are in the business of helping you write better copy. That was what we thought the business we were in. And we thought we're going to sell to copywriters and who are all going to use it in their copy work because it's obviously great and useful for them. And so we launched this copytesting.com, and the name is very clear. We had no everybody got instantly what we did and all that stuff. It was great early on. But then cracks started to emerge. So any strategy you have is a hypothesis of what's going to work. You're always operating with limited data, so you're making the best decisions you can. And you're also running on a lot of guesses or assumptions, and some of those need more data to before you validate whether those assumptions are true or not. And in our cases, these assumptions we had made didn't pan out. In fact, we were quite wrong about them. So we learned that we are not in the business of writing copy. Actually, we are actually in the business of delivering audiences, putting companies or whatever they produce in front of the audience that they're trying to sell to. That's actually the business we're in. And copy testing as a use case is great, but we're going to add more use cases down the line. It was another thing that emerged was that we discovered so many other things how we can use the panels that we have, the research panels, and so then also the name copy testing became limiting, because copy testing says what you do, and it kind of makes you monofunctional. That's because you don't expect that user testing.com also does a bunch of other things. I mean, it might, but I mean, in fact, now they do, I think, card sorting and all kinds of stuff, but which is kind of user testing. But so they will never be, other tools. Name can be limiting. So in our case, I felt it's going to limit our future potential, because copy testing is way too niche to begin with. Second mistake we did was that the assumption that copywriters are the target audience was wrong. One, they don't have money, they don't want to spend money, and they also actually didn't take to the tool. Because and I quote many copywriters say, "Ooh, I don't like the fact that somebody is like able to now challenge my work. Somebody has data on whether what I write is good or not." Because up to this point, before our tool came about, it was your opinion versus my opinion. Like I can write copy, and if you, the client, you don't like it, well, that's your problem because it's clearly great. But now we have data. Now it sucks, man. And they didn't actually like it. And then we saw that who was liking it, who were intrigued by the idea were like people higher up in the marketing organization, VP marketings, product marketers, people like that, performance marketers. And a lot of them were like, "Oh, this is great, but like, can you do B2B?" Because we also, as one of the assumptions we had was that this is perfect for consumer products, especially e-commerce. Like e-commerce has a lot of product pages. You can optimize the copy on your hundreds of thousands of product pages. Turned out product marketers at e-commerce, once they ship a product page, they never think about the copy again. It's not a problem to solve. In B2B, where they have high annual contract values, it's a different ballgame. However, in marketing organizations, the heads of marketing, they don't care about copy. Copy is delegated to junior people. It's outsourced. It's like the new intern, Johnny, let him do the copy. But what the marketing leadership is concerned about is brand perceptions, how we come across, differentiation, positioning, and also messaging. And so there is a hierarchy. Like first you have your positioning, like what are you about, for whom, from which you comes messaging, what are the 3 or 5 key messages that we're sending out about ourselves, and then finally it's like the actual lines of copy that we write. And so it's also like when we're trying to sell to marketing, but a thing they don't care about, or they think it's very tactical. It's like, who cares about the line of copy? I'm not going to spend thousands of dollars to figure out whether my button copy is, could be better. And obviously, we didn't feel that we were in the business of fixing button copy, so there was a mismatch there. So, in a nutshell, who we were marketing to was a mismatch, and how we were marketing to, our positioning was a mismatch, and also like the target, like B2C versus B2B, and there are many things. And finally, the thing about literal descriptive names. So copy testing is a literal name. We do copy testing. So if your website is called WeSellMicrophones.com, I have a pretty good idea what you sell. You sell microphones, but then so does everybody else. Competition is tough out there. There's nobody, like right now we don't have competition, like direct competition, who does exactly what we do, but only for a short while. It's a transient advantage that we're the only ones doing this thing. The copycats will come. And so a literal descriptive name is a handicap. It's a weak brand name, yet brand is your long-term best competitive advantage. You're one of the strongest moats you can have. And so let's say that we're an SEO company and we are called SEO company. And then they're comparing us to all these SEO brands.
Mm-hmm.
And we cannot have any, how do we even measure that we are being talked about if we're called SEO company? So same with copy testing. Copy testing is a methodology. So we can't build a brand, or we can, but it's going to be considerably harder. It's an unnecessary handicap. Marketing is hard enough. That our brand is a literal name, but also, as I said, monofunctional, all these other issues. And so, based on all these factors, like, okay, we need a name change, and let's better do it now when it's still easier. We don't have. Most people don't know we exist. This is a startup, early stage startup, and so we decided to go then with Winter.
Before we dive into those details, thank you for laying out kind of the foundation and giving us the context to understand, where you're coming from. I had a quick question around business strategy here, because what I've seen in the market is that usually companies start with a general approach and then start focusing on a niche and start to narrow down, but you decided to go the other way around. Was that an intentional decision, or was it just something that naturally evolved? Or did you think of optimizing that effort into the beginning? Let's start with something hyper specific and then, see what we can do from there.
Well, in the way I see it, we are super niche. We're very niche. Like a tool for just messaging is as niche as it can get. Obviously, it could be messaging for healthcare startups, but like the idea that you even need to do messaging testing, it's a pretty new idea. It's not a well-established category. We're not doing like category creation over here, but it's like a subcategory creation. So a lot of our marketing is also around that, hey, you should be doing message testing. It's a thing to do. Just as like you do heat maps or user testing or things like that, you should do message testing. And so our niche is that we are about this one thing that you do. Now, in terms of our internal marketing, we do now say, if you go to our site, we say it's for B2B. We do have consumer panels and we service, e-commerce companies as well still. But we are saying we are for B2B companies. And internally, we're going after SaaS, B2B SaaS, and agencies as our core target audiences. So I would say that it's pretty niche.
It definitely is. So thanks for kind of clearing that up, because it makes this perception. I'm very glad that you mentioned, that brand is a long-lasting value, and that sort of emotional connection that it creates with the audience is one of the things that's also the most difficult to build, but at the same time, one of the most, let's say, future-proof things that you can do for your own business. So
Absolutely.
When you decided to go with this name, did you have anything particular in mind, or were you more driven to make it something that's short and memorable, something that people can easily find online?
Short and memorable, definitely. You don't want to have a hard-sounding name. Easy to pronounce. Those were kind of like the guardrails. So short, easy to pronounce, and so on. And then, there's the marketing trend of, not a marketing trend, sorry. There's a kind of a brand trend that there's a lot of like human names, Casper, or Susie, or all these various companies that are like a person's name. Goldman Sachs built this new brand around the name. Actually, Marcus, I think, is their brand. I might be wrong, but anyways, so I started to think about it, and so there's quite a bit of name research we did, and there's quite a bit of name science that is also out there. And so basically, research shows that the more simple and human sounding the name, the greater the company's success. And brands with short, easy to pronounce names were viewed more positively by investors, and the companies were getting basically more money. And companies even were able to companies with shorter, easy to pronounce name were more able to boost their book to market ratios and so on and so forth. And so we wanted to, and Winter, the name we eventually went with, is also a person's name. It's not as common as Peter or so on, but it's if you Google it, there's millions of Winters around. So it's also a name of a person. So it's kind of an unexpected name, and it's by using this kind of a name, we're less concerned with sounding corporate and serious, and more human. And if you look at traditional B2B marketing, there's so much is just boring, dry jargon, and we don't want to be that, especially being about messaging. We want to have a little fun with the name. And then how I actually got the name Winter is like I hired a guy from Fiverr and said, hey, here's a list of 10,000 human names that I took from some website. I want you to see which websites have which names have .com or .io available or for sale for a reasonable price. And came back, and all .coms were taken, all, which was interesting. And most 99% .ios were also taken. And for Winter.io was available, and .com was for sale, meaning not in active use. There wasn't a brand occupying it. So, and there was a pun with winter, like the season. And we can have fun with this, especially for the launch. Winter is coming, some Game of Thrones type of stuff. And so we went with Winter. We liked the name. Also, the founders being from Estonia, a Nordic country, winter, cold, kind of like resonated with us. And so, so we went with it.
So thanks for sharing the story. I like how, you're truly, getting into the nitty gritty of it and explaining like everything you did step by step. I wanted just to roll back a little bit and talk about the methodology that you used to actually understand, when it was time for a rebrand and what kind of brand you wanted to build going forward, kind of in the next stage of the development of your startup. So you're obviously, you're one of the most respected specialists in optimization, and not just that, all kind of the connected areas to it, because there's so much that goes into CRO and all the disciplines that are connected to it, which is, well, almost everything that goes into marketing and beyond. So which elements of your experience were the most useful in this process, and kind of what were the things that you looked at? I saw on LinkedIn that you mentioned that you talk to customers, and you often talk to almost all of them that you onboard onto Winter. What are other kind of tools in your toolbox that you used?
Yeah, so qualitative research is a big one, especially when you're like an early stage startup and the quant data is harder to come by. You just don't have meaningful sample sizes. So my experimentation optimization background is giving me the mentality of that change is just a normal part of life. I'm not resistant to change. If you have an experimenter's mindset, then like there are no holy cows. Everything is up for grabs. I am interested in signals that are telling me which direction to go to. So obviously you don't just blindly follow whatever, like as they say, you can't A/B test your way to success. You need to have vision. You need to have conviction. You need to have a point of view, which are all the things I have. But you still listen to the market and you see that it, how it clicks. Another interesting data point was that when we rolled out, and as I said, like I thought our market is B2C, meaning like B2C companies, like we're B2B. But B2B companies were much more happy with our service, and they got it better, and the test reorder rate, like the retention and like the lifetime value, all those things, like that's the direction we should head to. And also then we obviously realize things like they have money and budget and power, but we have a positioning conflict here. So yeah, me being used to running a lot of experiments definitely helps, and a lot of qualitative research. I'm doing all the demos myself still right now as a founder, and that on average I do like 5-6 demos a day. In fact, before our talk here, I just finished 2 demos, and I have 2 more after this chat.
That's fantastic, and it sounds very intense at the same time. But I definitely understand, the value of talking to customers, working with startups for such a long time. I know that this is one of the most valuable things you can do, especially as a marketer or a content creator. No matter what your role is, if you're somewhere in the communication field, you have to talk to people. You have to understand what they're thinking, and challenge those perceptions. And this is kind of your bread and butter. And I love that you mentioned, that copywriters didn't get the service or felt that resistance to it simply because they're not used to someone challenging their work with data in this manner. And I think I welcome this type of service into the market. I think we definitely need it. And I'm really looking forward to see, how it evolves and how it kind of challenges people to level up and not just go on their personal preferences, which is such a big issue in design and content.
I want to clarify that I'm generalizing here. Obviously, there have been a number of copywriters who are all in and who are actively using it. So
of course.
I love copywriters, but to my surprise, a large chunk of them were resistant. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. We feel like even if you've worked in a startup format or kind of embody this way of doing things, we're used to everything that you said, dealing with change, moving quite fast, putting things out there before they're perfect so you can figure out if they actually work or not, all of these things. But talking to you and so many others still kind of brings this up to the surface that it's not a generalized thing. There's so much resistance. There are so many mentalities and kind of stereotypes that keep kind of going forward along with the other changes that are happening. So when someone challenges the status quo, it's definitely something that helps the entire community and the industry evolve. And I feel like you've been doing this for a long time. You've been challenging the status quo for a long time. And you actually mentioned in a post a short while ago that, picking a fight is good for marketing, standing for something is good for the brand, and you need to repulse them and attract others, and that turning away some of the market is scary. So I want to unpack this a little bit so you can give us kind of your perspective on this. So what are you fighting against? You picked a fight with the status quo.
Typically with Neil Patel, but yeah, also status quo.
So we're talking about kind of dodgy, marketing practices, about things that are taken as such and not questions. Am I kind of giving listeners who maybe don't know who Neil Patel is, because we might have some designers and other creatives that haven't come across his.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't want to really talk about him. But yeah, that's an ongoing little feud, just for fun for the most part. But with Winter, I mean, our enemy here is the status quo, which is like people are not testing their messaging. They're just going to market. Somebody wrote a line of copy. They decided like, oh, these are the 5 reasons to make business with us, to buy from us. These are the 5 key benefits or whatever your value proposition consists of. But like, do they care about those? Which one do they care about the most? What actually resonates or doesn't? And imagine if you're like spending thousands of dollars a month on messaging that doesn't work as well as it could. Like it's just a massive waste. And so currently I'm mainly fighting this. Copy matters, and in fact, there's hard data that says that copy is the most influential part of getting people to convert. It's the most influential aspect, twice as influential as copy. So I'm fighting that mindset that people think that it's okay to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a visual rebrand, and then we get a copywriter and pay $500, check done. And while copy provides more money ROI than design. So that is kind of the fight that I'm fighting here.
Cool. So you're definitely for the people who get this, the people who know that this is an important aspect, and the people who are willing to have their work tested and challenged, no matter if they're marketing directors or someone that's specifically focused on copy. I was very curious. Did you test your own copy before launching the winter rebrand?
Yeah. So yes and no. So we built the company because we wanted to test our messaging, and there was no way to do it, because like my other company, CXL, we have some 60 different long form sales pages for our courses, and then PPC landing pages, webinar landing pages, all that. And the way to increase the conversion rate on those pages is to improve the copy, and I didn't know what's wrong with the copy. There was no tool that could tell me, which led me to build Winter. For ourselves, it's kind of tricky doing message testing for ourselves. It's because the people on our panel, because we have our own panel, and this is another topic, it's like these companies offering you panel providers. It's a big scam. We didn't know that it's a massive ripoff. Like, we didn't want to build our own panel. We thought we're going to use one of those third-party platforms. Hooey! It's such rubbish. It's just companies spend, I digress. Anyway, so we built our own panel. Now, all these people on our panel, they already know about us. They like filled out forms to be on our panel. So we now say, hey, what do you think about this? There's a little bias in there. They're not looking at it with a fresh pair of eyes. I mean, it's still useful, and so we have done. So when we had a consumer panel, we tested our messaging when we were still copy testing on a consumer panel. Like, this is like the regular people on the street, and people even didn't know what copy is. Like, what are you talking about here? I was like, oh, like, this is not a mass product. Like, this is definitely for the niche. And that's an interesting thing about jargon or buzzwords. Is like, yes, the regular person on the street doesn't know what copy is, but also I'm not going to not use that word when I'm talking to my actual target audience, because they get it. Like, there's some jargon that's actually needed.
Yep, that makes perfect sense. I was curious simply because this bias makes it difficult to use your own kind of eat your own dog food, but it's in a different format. So you're definitely offsetting, let's say, some of that risk, I guess, by doing all of these customer interviews and doing the very intense customer development, which is obviously super important. So you changed kind of you expanded the brand, you didn't necessarily change the story that it was telling, you just elevated it to a more strategic level, let's call it that. Would you say that?
Exactly. So instead of copy, we now talk about messaging, just short of positioning. Because like positioning is more involved than strategic. Like, I don't think like a SaaS tool can tell you what your positioning should be. So that's not the business we're in, but we can tell you how it comes across, which is really, really important. So it's tied to positioning in the sense that positioning has to tell the target audience how we are the best for your type of user, for your type of company, for this use case, why we're the best for that. And a lot of positioning testing is done in sales meetings, which is great, but it's very slow and doesn't scale, and people are busy. And like I've been talking about doing the importance of user research and interviews for the last decade. Still, people, it's starting to go more mainstream, I think, qualitative research, user research. But it's so time consuming. So that is another, problem that we're solving. It's like we give you data like that.
Yes.
It's not as good as the interview where you can ask follow-up questions and there's an actual conversation, but it costs way less and it's like done for you right away.
And it's more scalable in that way as well, because doing it in-house can really add pressure to the team and delay all of the other things as well. On your note about positioning and the strategic perspective, at some point you posted that people want to put you in a box and you should let them. And I feel like the kind of when you try internally to do a rebrand or conceive kind of shape the next stage of the company, because that's usually what a rebrand does. It either reflects an evolution or just takes the company to the next level. How do you balance your strategic view, what you want to put out there, with the box people want to put you in? Because I feel that's a difficult balance to achieve. Either people are tend to go one way or the other, or just tilt the balance in favor.
Well, if you're not making it super clear which box to put you in, you're gonna let people decide, and that's when you lose control of the narrative, and that's dangerous because they might put you in the wrong box. They get a wrong idea of who you're for and what you're about, and then changing these preconceived notions or ideas is much more difficult than planting that first idea at the start. So like a classic example of this is Segway. When Segway was launched, and before the product launch campaign was happening, the founder refused to describe what it is. It just says this is going to revolutionize transportation. Oh, what is it? What is it? What is it? Can't say. It cannot be described. So what are people thinking? They're going to make up their own story. They're going to fill in the blanks. And they're thinking, flying cars. Finally, we're getting flying cars. And then when they do the product launch, finally, and there's a live TV and says the founder rolled to the stage with Segway, people are like, the fuck is this? There's like, disappointment. And he still refused to, define what it is. And yet now, electric scooters are ubiquitous around downtowns all over the world, and they came and said, hey, these are electric scooters, ride them around the city. Makes sense. So they put themselves in a box, and I think you should let people. Just today I was doing a demo with a company, and they said scaling agile. We're helping you scale agile. What do you think they do?
They're either in software. I would say that they're in software and they teach agile for organizations, but
you're not too far off. But it's like helping you manage whole accuracy and then like decentralized organizations. But basically, I was looking at their like how they describe them. Like, I want to figure out what are you like? Are you like a CRM? Are you a project management tool? Like, what are you, right? I'm trying to, and if they don't, actually, I do feel that making it a little bit hard. So basically, it's the cognitive disfluency is beneficial because, thinking fast and slow. Normally, we're just thinking automatically. And if I say, I'm a CRM, I even don't read. I'm just like, CRM, I already have one of those, not pausing to think. So if you make it a little bit harder to figure out, people are actually going to stop and use the slow thinking part of their brain. So some cognitive disfluency is good. There's a fine balance, obviously, and it's not an exact science. So you can go easily the other way where it's unclear and I just don't get it. And if I don't get it, I don't buy it. which is again why message testing is important. Do they get it?
Absolutely. It builds awareness ultimately. I think that this self-awareness is something that supports rebrand, branding in general, brand building, building copy, building the entire business, and building ourselves as people who have businesses and build businesses or contribute to them in any way or form. And it's we come from such a long tradition of doing marketing and all the other disciplines, PR as well. Doing them the traditional way. It's surprising how long-standing these practices are, and that we're still doing them in 2021 when we have so many other opportunities to gauge sentiment and to really understand what people are thinking and doing with the things that we put out there. So again, I think that a rebrand is a good opportunity to challenge those perceptions, to challenge what you think about your business, and to really elevate that and go really pro on what it means to build your brand and business going further. In terms of who architected this change and this rebrand, it was obviously yourself. Which other members of the team were kind of engaged in this process, and how did you, I don't know, maybe just delegate ownership of several aspects of it?
Mm-hmm. Well, it was led by me and championed by me, and so in that sense, like, I did check in with my sounding board, my product manager. I have my other shareholders, like my co-founders that are more passive. So like, I use them as a sounding board. Like, what do you think? And mostly it was positive, and I mean, I am a pretty strong personality, and I can easily come in at you with a lot of force, and then usually I get my way. So people also used to me having. I have a history of having made the right decisions, which are scary at first. Changed like what CXL was about, and when people were like, when we changed from an all-purpose agent to a conversion agency, people were very resistant. And like, I've had many of these cases where I say, drop everything, we're gonna go that way now, and these big bets have all paid off. So I've built up some goodwill, let's say, that people are trusting my intuition, or my synthesis of the situation.
Definitely, and you can see that strong voice of yours, not only how it's reflected in community, but I feel that it also reflects into the brand, because you're creating so much content around winter, and it's having an increasingly clear and very articulate voice. Of course, first through you, because we're all watching you, and then the brand itself, when it's going to outgrow, let's say, your leadership in a good way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the beginning, since this is a self-funded or customer-funded company, we haven't raised any money, so I can't throw a bunch of money on ads and whatever. So social media marketing just plays an important role.
It definitely does, and it's also helpful in the way that you can see how the brand is received. And speaking about that, what kind of reactions did you get? Like, hey, why did you change the name so soon after launching the company? And what's this about?
Reactions were like, oh, copy testing was so clear. I liked it. Which is like, yeah, it was clear. I agree with you, man. I also liked it. So, but people don't know the context. Like they don't know. So also they say, why did you choose a name that doesn't mean anything? It's a common let's say objection I hear. Not a lot, but it comes up. Well, like, this was a conscious decision on my part to pick a name that doesn't mean anything. It's one of your Googles, like, has no preconceived notions about it, and it can be anything. It can become anything. It really leaves it open. Yeah.
It does. It definitely does. And how did you kind of, was there any backlash, I guess, although it's a strong word. I don't think that people had the time to grow as attached to the brand to, really become very negative about the change. But what did you feel? What was the impression of the customers when you launched it? Because obviously there were
Mhm.
customers who made that transition.
Yeah. I mean, no real pushback. It was like mostly we got words. I mean, most people said nothing at all, which is your standard, right? It's just like no response. And the people who, when we announced to the email list, oh, by the way, your account is now on winter, not copy testing, and nothing changes for you. The people who did respond, most people liked the new positioning, and that's actually the word they use because now we are like message optimization and message testing for B2B, which is the new positioning, and they're like, yes, I'm digging that. So that was encouraging. I'm really used to not. I've never been managing through consensus. That's not my style really. I'm more like a benevolent dictator type.
You're definitely bold in your approach, and this has been true for a number of years. And I believe it's also one of the factors why you have such a large following, and you've made such a great impact on the community. In terms of, let's say, breaking points that appear when doing a rebrand, which aspects, for we're talking. So the podcast audience is made of creatives of all types, and we're talking about rebrand. So we've talked about the process of doing the visual side of things and aligning people internally, cascading that towards customers. But what about the more technical aspects, which you have such a strong hold of, in terms of SEO, migrating stuff? How difficult was that? Although you had, you didn't have 10 years of worth of content and pages to
Yeah,
migrate.
well, I mean, we had relatively recently, did a domain name change for CXL when we went from conversionxl.com to cxl.com, and that is a very high traffic website.
Yes.
And then we recovered our rankings within 3 months there, so I wasn't concerned about it. And I mean, technically, it's pretty straightforward, right? Like 301, all your domains, and bam, it's Google Search Console updates, and you change the links wherever possible. So it's not very technically involved. It was seamless. And then in Winter's case, our domain authority at this point is so low that I didn't even check our rankings. Like I know over time it will be fine. Like we can't rank for shit anyway right now. So.
Not yet, definitely. So I love this idea, that you decided so early on and that you went with the change and that you didn't, wait for 5 years before you were sure that this is what you wanted to do. I
Yeah.
love this fast approach that's also strategic because moving fast does not necessarily involve breaking things, as the saying goes, which has become too much of, I think, too much of an accepted truth, although it is not. You can be fast and strategic at the same time. And I love how your example illustrates this very well. And what I also wanted to ask was a little bit about another rebrand that you did that has a different approach to it, which is spinning off CXL agency into a new brand
Mhm.
called Spiro. So,
Yeah.
given that that's a different approach, could you share with us, what the thought process behind that was?
Right. So I started CXL as an agency. And then many years later, maybe 5 years after starting it, I added on CXL Institute, back then Conversion XL Institute, as a brand line extension. So it was like we were looking for ways to monetize the community we had, the email list, and so on and so forth. And it seemed like it's easier if we use the same brand and just it's another product of CXL. Back then, this was 2016. I was a little uneducated about matters like brand extensions and the fact that they fail most of the time. Since then, I have read countless books on the topic, and there's a reason why like Unilever and P&G have their all separate brands for the soap and the dish soap and then whatever, it's all separate brands on purpose, because line extensions typically fail because it's very hard to stand for two ideas at the same time with the same name. Like back when cigarettes were still a thing, like when Marlboro introduced Marlboro Light, the whole brand, crumbled under, like, it used to be the tough guy, the Marlboro Countryman, and then suddenly there was Marlboro Light. Like, what is it even about anymore? Already in the like 80s, things were, people knew about this, that don't do it. I didn't know it, and then I regretted it later. But and I was too late to correct it. So this is a story of waiting too long. And so it became an increasingly big problem for us. Are we an e-learning company? Are we an agency? And some people knew one side and didn't know the other side. And what are we? And behind the scenes, we also had separate teams, separate legal entities. And then it was like, who pays for what? And if we wanted to raise money for one of the entities or sell off one of the entities, nobody wants both, because they're separate businesses, like you either want the agency or like it's too much confusion on the inside, on the outside. And so we decided to spin make them into separate brands. The internal debate obviously was which one is going to be a new name, is it the agency or the institute? And we decided that with all the assets that we have, the blog traffic, the email list, and so on, those make more sense for the e-learning business because it's a lower price point and etc. And then the agency is more referral business anyway because it's very expensive. And so new brand for the agency, new direction as well. And now it's Spiro, and CXL Institute is just CXL now.
That's super, super helpful. And I love the fact that you mentioned brand extensions, because it's something that I don't think we realize, even as marketers, until you're actually confronted with the choice, or you have to look in retrospect and analyze, what's happened and why things aren't working. I think that generally as humans, we crave clarity so much and focus. And it's so difficult for us, especially now, especially when we're, I'm going to repeat the same cliche, but we're drinking from a fire hose of information. We can't, sometimes we have difficulty thinking straight. We've all had a past rough year. It's not easy now. It's not like 2021 change everything. So I feel like giving customers clarity and giving them reliability and knowing, that not creating extra cognitive effort for them, except for that little bit that makes a difference and gets them to pay attention. I think that it is an essential principle to follow in business, in positioning, in branding, and so on. So just to wrap up, you've given us, so much to work with and to think about. But I want to go just a little bit deeper into your mindset and ask you, why do you think the kind of main principles are to follow, or the main questions to use when you're looking to do a rebrand or you're considering, engaging in one?
Well, it'd be easier to stay with the name that you already have. So I would encourage you to be definitely sure that you're actually solving actual problems. Like, what are the problems? And sometimes we get just tired marketing our own stuff, and it would sound new and exciting to have a new name and a new design, but like there is a potential that there's it goes wrong. There's clarity issues and so on. However, if you have the data that yes, absolutely, the current name has a number of problems, sameness problems maybe, or like whatever it is you have just an unpronounceable name. You're like Marketizator, one of the monster names from the past. Then I would just go ahead and do it. I bet 2 years after you change your name, nobody will remember the first one.
That is so true. You talked about, you mentioned that you read a number of books that you found very helpful in understanding, branding and brand extensions and the whole dynamic of the field. Could you recommend a few that really stood out for you as highly valuable reads?
Oh, well, one is the classic, the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing. That one that says one of the laws is like, don't do it.
Definitely. So thank you so much, Pep, for everything that you've shared today, for all of the details, for being so straightforward about it. You've lifted the community so many times with sharing your trajectory and your decisions. So I definitely think that this is going to be such a welcome and necessary addition to, what it takes to do a rebrand well and when to do it, especially for startups who are sometimes not as well versed or experienced in branding things because obviously hence the nature of a startup, but this is going to be a great resource for them to dig into and really help them make better decisions that hopefully they won't regret too much later.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks for exploring another fascinating rebrand process with us. If you found it helpful, subscribe to the show and leave us a review. Until next time, this is Andra Zaharia. Thanks for watching The Drag and Drop Show by Creatopy.